Saturday!
That's right, it's Saturday, everybody! Gather around! It's time for another episode of Brooklyn's Roses! Welcome to Brooklyn's Roses! The fun storytelling adventure for kids of all ages. In our last episode, Brooklyn and her family came together and made a wonderful breakfast. They also shared what they loved about their family and expressed thanks for being connected to one another. Well, today, Brooklyn is eager to meet the cousins that Daddy and Mommy told her about. Would you like to meet them too? Well, come on along with me and discover that cousins are best friends. It was early on a warm summer morning when Brooklyn and her family began to travel to Calvert County. The drive seemed extremely long to Brooklyn. This was her first time traveling to see her cousins and other family members. "Are we almost there, Mommy?" Brooklyn asked. "We've got a bit of a drive ahead of us, little Rose," replied Mommy. "Ooh, the arches! Can we stop?" shouted Brooklyn. "Are you hungry, little Rose?" asked Daddy. "Yes, please, can we stop? I'm hungry," said Brooklyn. Daddy pulled into the drive-thru and everyone ordered their favorite breakfast food and began to eat as the journey continued. The ride to Calvert County would take just over an hour, and when they arrived, Brooklyn was amazed at the long driveway and huge front yard. They were finally here! The house sat at the bottom of the hill, and in the middle of the hill was another house with an equally huge yard and beautiful trees. At the very top of the hill was yet a third house with a tire swinging from one of the trees in the front yard. Brooklyn was nervously excited as she and her family exited the truck and headed to the door. But then, Brooklyn was amazed when her daddy just walked into the house without ringing the doorbell. What she didn't know is that each house was occupied by a relative who saw Brooklyn and her parents approaching as they traveled the long driveway. Everyone knew who was coming before the truck got to the house. Brooklyn held her mommy's hand as they followed Daddy into the house, where they were greeted with overwhelming joy by Aunt Gertrude. "There's my beautiful family," Aunt Gertrude said as she smiled and hugged everyone. "Hi, Gertrude. How are you?" asked Daddy. "I am wonderful," she replied. "Hi, sweetheart," said Aunt Gertrude as she hugged Brooklyn's mommy. "Is this little Rose?" asked Aunt Gertrude as she looked down at Brooklyn, giving her the biggest, most genuine smile Brooklyn had ever seen. "How do you know my name?" Brooklyn whispered. "Well, your daddy and mommy talk about you all the time, and I'm so glad to meet you, little Rose. I'm your Aunt Gertrude." Before Brooklyn could say anything, Aunt Gertrude reached down, scooped Brooklyn up in her arms, and squeezed her tightly as she swung her back and forth, kissing her cheeks. "I'll have lunch ready in a little while. You can all relax in the family room while I call a house and have the kids come down to meet their cousin, Brooklyn." Now this is what Aunt Gertrude said. But Daddy said, "Where's John, Gertrude?" "He's up house at Grandpop's, screening in his back porch," replied Aunt Gertrude. Now up house was a term Brooklyn never heard before. What did it mean? It appeared Daddy and Mommy knew what it meant, but Brooklyn was a little bit confused. Aunt Gertrude picked up the telephone, and after pressing some numbers, Brooklyn could hear her say, "Lee, tell John and the kids to come down house. Little Rose is here with her mommy and daddy, and she wants to meet everyone." It was only a few minutes later, and Brooklyn heard the sliding glass door open at the rear of Aunt Gertrude's house. She heard children laughing and talking as they neared the family room. "These are your cousins, little Rose. This is Nyla, Adriana, Gabriella, Natalia, Lily, Cameron, and Caden. Say hi to Brooklyn, everyone." "Hi!" they all shouted simultaneously. "Hey there," said Uncle John as he walked into the room. "Hey, John, how are you?" replied Daddy and Mommy. "I'm good. I was just up house putting a new screen enclosure on Grandpa's house. Linda Lee said she'd be down in a few after she put some ribs in the smoker." "This must be little Rose," said Uncle John as he looked down at Brooklyn. "Hi, little Rose. I'm your Uncle John, your daddy's brother." "Hi, Uncle John," replied Brooklyn. Brooklyn enjoyed meeting her other family members. Everyone was nice to her. And just as she was about to ask Mommy if she could play with her cousins, Adriana asked, "Brooklyn, do you want to go outside and play hide and seek?" Brooklyn nodded her head in agreement, and Adriana took her by the hand and led her outside, where she saw a barn in the distance, several sheds, and a huge garage with big trucks and tractors inside. Spending time with her cousins was going to be so much fun. As all the kids headed outside, Aunt Gertrude said, "You all stay down house, hear me?" "Yes, ma'am," all the kids replied. "Brooklyn, we can only play down here at our house, okay? We'll probably go up house later," said Adriana. "Where's up house?" asked Brooklyn. "It's at the top of the hill, Grandpa's house," said Gabriella. Now Brooklyn understood. Up house was the house at the top of the hill, and down house was Aunt Gertrude's and Uncle John's house at the bottom of the hill. Up and down. It all made sense. "You'd better hide. I'm only counting to 10, said Cameron. Where was Brooklyn going to hide? There was so much space and opportunity. "Come with me," said Adriana. Adriana and Brooklyn ran towards the trees and hid behind one of the bushes. They could see Cameron, and everyone was checking. This was so much fun. Cameron began to sing. Gone again, where could they be? I'll find you, you can't hide from me. Cameron checked the sides of the house, the sheds, and behind the fire pit, but couldn't find anyone. He continued singing. Gone again, where could they be? I'll find you, you can't hide from me. As Cameron headed down toward the barn, he passed the garden and heard laughter from behind a bush. He hurried around the bush to find Gabriella, Caden, Natalia, and Lily. They were all hiding behind the bush. He began chasing them around the yard and realized he still needed to find Adriana and Brooklyn. He began singing again. Gone again, where could they be? I'll find you, you can't hide from me. Cameron began walking towards the tall trees that shielded Adriana and Brooklyn. Adriana put her finger to her lips, looked at Brooklyn, and whispered. He was getting close. Oh no! Thinking quickly, Brooklyn picked up a small rock and threw it in the opposite direction, which made Cameron turn and run towards the sound. Adriana and Brooklyn jumped up from their hiding place and ran as fast as they could toward the house. If they could make it to the patio steps before Cameron caught them, they'd be safe. Cameron saw them, and he saw them running, and he gave chase. He was fast and closing in on them. Adriana and Brooklyn were laughing as they tried to outrun Cameron, but he was catching up to them. Just before he caught to them, Adriana and Brooklyn reached base, and everyone laughed because they were having a good time. "Come wash your hands and get ready for lunch," said Aunt Gertrude. After a delicious lunch with her parents, Aunt Gertrude, Uncle John, and her cousins, Brooklyn was ready to play again. All the cousins went back outside and headed up house to meet Grandpa. On the way to Grandpa's house, Brooklyn's cousins told her about all the fun they have every summer, playing and growing gardens. Of course, Cameron and Caden liked summer for different reasons. They would help Grandpa in the tobacco field and then ride dirt bikes afterwards. It was so much to do, and Brooklyn wanted to share the experience with them. Daddy and Mommy followed everyone up house and greeted Grandpa along with the kids. Brooklyn was excited to meet her Grandpa. He was a kind and funny type of person and had plenty of candy around his house. Maybe that's why her cousins loved to visit so much. The cousins went outside to swing on the tire swing. After visiting Grandpa, everyone headed back down house. But first, they stopped at Aunt Carlene's house, which was in the center of Grandpa's and Aunt Gertrude's. Brooklyn was meeting so many family members today, and she enjoyed it. Aunt Carlene was very funny and gave lots of hugs. This made Brooklyn feel loved. Everyone treated her like they had known her all her life. And the biggest surprise was waiting for her back at Aunt Gertrude's and Uncle John's house. When they all arrived down house, Daddy and Mommy told Brooklyn they were getting ready to go home and wanted her to say goodbye to her cousins. Adriana, Gabrielle, Lily, Nyla, Natalia, Cameron, and Caden all lined up to give Brooklyn a big hug. Adriana said to Brooklyn, "I can't wait until you come back to visit. Maybe you can stay with us this summer." This was the best idea Brooklyn heard. "Daddy and Mommy, can I stay with my cousins this summer?" asked Brooklyn. "We'll talk about that, little Rose. Maybe so," said Daddy. All the cousins shouted, "Yay!" And this made Brooklyn feel happy. As Brooklyn and her parents were leaving, Aunt Gertrude gave Brooklyn a brown paper bag and said, "This is for the ride home." Once they were in the truck, Brooklyn looked in the bag to find a chicken sandwich. A hot piece of flavorful fried chicken between two pieces of bread. As Brooklyn ate her sandwich as they traveled home, she thought about the fun she had that day. Brooklyn realized one thing. Her cousins were her best friends, and she loved everything about them. Wow. It sounds like Brooklyn enjoyed meeting her family members and hopes that she'll be able to spend the summer with them. I hope she can too. What about you? Well, come back next week to find out what happens. I hope you enjoyed this week's story. I can't wait to see you next week for another episode of Brooklyn's Roses. Until then, smile to make someone else smile. Bye-bye.